like at 4:30. I didn't know it went live. Oh, we're live. Hello, everybody.
Hey.
I'm Chuck, Jeff, Greg.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
It's like one of those days. Oh, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's great to be with you. Greg, I just love this. Somebody said, you need to change the time that you do this. And Greg's like, it's on YouTube. You can watch
it. It's recorded, and we have clients in every time zone. There is not going to be a time that works for a lot of people, no matter what we do. So we're going to pick the time that's convenient for us then.
Jeff, I got to tell you this. Somebody called me today, did a little consult with somebody, and they said, yeah, I'm a DV 2021 winner from Nepal, and I want to apply for my adjustment of status. It says, great. What's your current status? I'm on an H-1B. Thinking, dude, why didn't you? He's got a low number. So fortunately, he's in Colorado. Aaron will be talking to him.
Oh, good. Good.
You guys can help him there. I said, you got to, if you're a DV winner and you're in the U.S. and 90 days have passed, honestly, you'd be stupid to go to the consulate. There's just they're too unpredictable at this point. But if you're going to adjust, I think we'd all agree you need local counsel, really good local counsel, because you're going to be able to pick up the phone and call the local people and say it's September 28th. Where's my visa? So,
hey, Chuck, are we going to talk about India and Kinsley?
I think we should. In fact, let's start off with this new proclamation, Greg, from President Biden on Friday.
Yeah.
Basically, in response to India becoming Trump-run land, and our good friend Cyrus Mehta just actually blogged on this. By the way, really, if you're really into detailed legal blogs, it's really a great blog. But this is reminiscent, isn't it, Greg, of the other COVID bans?
Yeah, no, and I guess the question that we're starting to see is how, will this ban be covered by the other litigation in Kinsley, because we don't specifically name this ban because it didn't exist when we filed that case. So, those who maybe don't know what we're talking about. The government added India. It's effective tomorrow. I would have gotten out of Dodge if I had a visa and a way to leave India. Probably would have been a smart thing to be in the U.S. by now. But assuming that wasn't possible, there's a question about visas, and as has become the pattern, this administration is taking the position that they are not going to issue visas to individuals subject to this ban, which is the same position they've taken on every other COVID ban. So in that regard, the only difference with this one that I can see is that they have already, at the get-go, have already exempted immigrant visas applicants and K-1 applicants, which have a national interest exemption now. But otherwise, this looks pretty similar to the other ones.
You know what's interesting about this? It's a little bit different. Maybe I missed some others. I don't think I did. In the implementation and enforcement section, it says this: the Secretary of State shall implement this proclamation as it applies to visas pursuant to such procedures as the Secretary of State, in consultation with DHS, may establish. I don't recall that in prior proclamations. And maybe it's like, hey, you know what? You really want to get sued again? You're going to lose, I promise. So I guess we'll see tomorrow if they stop issuing visas to folks.
Yeah.
We have to amend the Kinsley case. If you are an Indian national with an appointment tomorrow at a consulate and they say, sorry, ban's in place, can't give you a visa, please reach out to us. Our email is right here. And let us know if you want to be a plaintiff. And I guess, Jeff, we can just amend the Kinsley case.
Yeah.
Ask the judge for an amended order. It's a pretty straightforward issue here. But I'm not surprised President Biden did this. I mean, India is a nightmare. Although, I mean, they're not really, if you look at volume size, Brazil is pretty bad too. And Brazil's, I guess, still got.
Yeah, but you can still do an entry ban with, COVID testing and with vaccine, vaccine verification. He could do exactly what he's doing as far as public safety goes without doing the overreach, which is what they've been doing on each one of these bans.
I don't get it. I don't get why they're not just hey, take a COVID test, get a vaccine, and you can come. I don't understand that.
But even staying 14 days in another country, they've gone further than their own proclamations in how they've implemented it. So, they have choices here. Yeah,
well, they're apparently not using them. And of course, we have to talk about last week's announcement from the Department of State. And I know, Jeff, you love this. This was like your favorite weekend reading, and your email response to us was fantastic when you read this. You want to talk about what State did on Thursday night?
Yeah. So, what State did is that they issued once again, the priorities list for processing. And, up at the top are, Iraqi translators, kids that are going to age out, really emergency cases. Tier 2 is immediate relatives, K1s, and then it goes all the way down. And the very, very last priority for visa processing is DV 2021. And they specifically say it flat out. It's our last priority is, even though we know there's a deadline in September, we're just not placing emphasis on it.
It was a little surprising that they made that public.
Yeah.
Well, this, that actually explains a great deal, because talking about the Go case, we had a conference preparatory to our meeting now on May 5th with Judge Mehta. And we were asked, hey, have you guys seen this? And I hadn't seen it yet. I had been on the farm all day, and I hadn't seen it. And I said, well, let me guess. Does it say that the Department of State is now deciding that all VZs get priority and it should all be issued? And there's this awkward silence on the other end of the phone, thinking that I was kidding. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And then I went back and read this and said, oh, my God. I am glad I'm not the government lawyer that's got to defend this nonsense to Judge Mehta. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, the good news is we're scheduled for a status conference before Judge Mehta. We have a hearing scheduled for him. We can bring this to his attention. The other interesting piece of it, I think, is that, essentially it gives us a lot of ground to go in and say, look, here is, this is irreparable harm. It's clearly been established now. The government is saying we don't desire to process these cases. So definitely good evidence for us, Exhibit A.
But the good news about it too, Jeff, we were talking on Friday as we were arranging his meeting with Judge Mehta. We were asked, well, what kind of administrative record do you want? And our request was, we want copies of any documentation that talks about how you're prioritizing DVs. Again, I hadn't seen this when we asked for that. And there's this silence. So we will get that, if I'm not mistaken, by May 24th or so. And that sequences out our final hearing, our motion for summary judgment, motion to dismiss in the Go case. But what's important about that is we're going to get this stuff. We're going to get their thought process. Kind of the same stuff that we kind of got in Gomez. We'll actually get it all for the DV stuff as part of this motion. And this has got to be damning to the government. I guess they thought they were pulling the sting by coming out and saying this stuff, but it just seems to me a terrible litigation position for them to be in. Especially today, one of the things that Greg pointed out, he said, I quoted 1153. Okay, this is the allocation of visas. So there's a section of U.S. immigration law that says, here is how visas are allocated. And they have family-based visas. They've got employment-based visas. And Section C is diversity visas. And it starts out very simply. And I'm just going to quote it. It says, I got to go down to C here. Hold on a second. I was too far up. And C says this, in general, except as provided in paragraph 2, foreign nationals subject to the worldwide level of visas from diversity immigrants shall, not may, not could, not possibly, shall be allotted visas each fiscal year as follows. Jeff, I don't know when you use the word shall, but I'm judicious in how I use it. Two, it means you best be doing it.
Yeah, I mean, if I say to my kids, "You shall clean the dishes," they know exactly what that means.
Shall is so. This is I just don't see.
If we have time, we'll do the dishes.
Yeah, maybe we'll get around to it. Travel Gov, which is like my new favorite. I used to do State Gov, but now I just do Travel Gov. So, I don't think that word means what you think it means. It means you must do it. You can't put it at the bottom. The real frustrating thing about this is that they know they have an insurmountable mountain to climb. I mean, let's be clear about Department of State here. They have built a mountain of delays intentionally. Let's not kid ourselves. This is before COVID. They intentionally built an almost insurmountable mountain to climb. They did that through hiring freeze. They did it through reassigning of qualified consular officers or forcing a number of them to quit through a variety of means, and then not training anybody new. And then finally, of course, not accommodating after Trump's gone in the 4 months Biden's been president. There's no accommodation. There's no, hey, you Mr. Consular dude that used to work for us, can we bring you back for a year and you can work from DC and you can remotely adjudicate cases? Oh, can you get to Montenegro for the next year and help us? Nothing. Yeah. Nothing. And so they have built their own problem. And really, I think the only way out of this for our Go plaintiffs is the same thing that the Gomez plaintiffs face, which is the judge, he has to reserve visas for our clients. Keep in mind, we have not filed a class action, so we're not getting everybody's visa reserved.
Chuck, a question is, why has the Biden administration not done that on their own to reserve the visas? Why are they hanging on to this position that it's impossible? What interests are they defending? This is an administration that that opposed the Trump's plan to get rid of the diversity visa lottery. They could, the judge has done this previously in Gomez. This administration could take this position and have a pretty good shot at defending it. They might get sued on the other side, but why wouldn't they try?
Well, it reminds me, Greg, of TPS. Why are they opposing the ability of TPS applicants to adjust status at the Supreme Court of the United States?
Right.
Because there is an internal battle by let's call them career staff. No, this is the way it has to be.
Right.
And I think that's what they're doing on this. This is the way we've always interpreted it since the beginning of time.
This is the career people at these agencies running the show, and the political appointees having no idea.
And not asking and not fixing. Maybe that will change. I mean, at TPS at the last minute once Urge to Do gets nominated. But
well, I mean, this affects all our cases. This attitude affects their negotiating position on every one of our cases.
Yep. So that's kind of to give you guys an update about what's going on in the Biden administration, which is not a whole lot that's good. I mean, it's great if you're an Iraqi translator. Now, these issues like Iraqi translators, again, we're talking about 14 to 15,000 cases that have to get done as of yesterday that they've been sitting on. We all have Iraqi translator cases, right? They've been jerking around people for years on these cases. And now all of a sudden, these people are dead if they don't do them. Oh, we better prioritize it now. I mean,
there's one other thing I want to mention before we get into the specific cases, and that is today's news. Some of you may have heard about it. The Biden administration reversed themselves on refugees today, and they have agreed to take 62,000, take the 62,000 numbers that they had promised earlier, and that's the number that they're going to go with now. That happened after they originally tried to listen to, I don't know who they were listening to, but they tried to break that promise, but it was public outrage that caused them to reverse. But that's the lesson here, which is, I mean, litigation is one very powerful tool, and that's being pursued. Obviously, that's why we're here today. But the advocacy that you guys do on social media and with members of Congress and all of this stuff, and with reporters, it matters on there. That this administration doesn't always do the right thing until they're pushed to do the right thing. And when you guys are out there advocating loudly, the message radiates. So that's the lesson I think of today with this good news for refugees.
My favorite part of that announcement today was we're reversing the Trump administration limitation on 15. Wait,
they're reversing the reversing of the reversing.
At least be honest about the fact that you screwed up. I love when they blame the media for not understanding their written announcement that they weren't increasing the cap. But kudos, I mean, they're doing it. And I don't know if you guys have noticed.
Why does it have to feel so bad to get them to do the right thing? Why don't they just surprise us and do the right thing from the beginning?
The problem is they didn't invite the three of us in. If they'd invited the three of us in, these issues would be gone. They would be dealt with. We would be moving on to fun stuff at this point. I don't know if you've noticed, but apparently there's no longer a crisis at the border because people have stopped reporting about it. So I guess if it goes away, it goes away. We do have a shout out, though, to Sven Olinsky. And his dad was issued the visa today, waiting for the passport back. Man, another great dad. That was he was in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago with Michelle Hackman. He was kind of the face of one of our cases, and it was great to see him and his dad, who look exactly alike, by the way. It's very, very much an apple and a tree thing. So congrats on that. So we mentioned briefly Go, which is we have a meeting with the judge at 10 a.m. on Wednesday. I have tweeted, if you want to call in, there's a phone number to listen in to that. First of all, I want to shout out to Judge Mehta because I have now been able to cancel a dentist appointment because of that. Thank you very much. Getting 2 crowns put in, and I was not looking forward to it, and now I simply have to cancel it. So that's quite all right. Just that you know what we're doing with Judge Mehta is we're setting up the schedule to get to a final hearing. And that's what we'll be talking about with the judge, starting with in about 3 weeks, getting the government's file on this. We'll right at the same time, we'll be filing our motion for summary judgment. And then there'll be time frames within that with hopefully a hearing sometime in early July. Hopefully not July 4th week, which oddly enough will be 1 year from the time that we filed Acker. Would be that same week. So it goes around, comes around. So that's where we are in Go. We're actively working on that. And do want to thank government counsel for being very easy to work with. It's just been really just made it easy to just talk, which is good because being able to talk on these cases is one way that we're able to resolve them. And just an update on Gomez. There is no update on Gomez. But keep in mind, the Gomez issue is the same thing as the Go issue. And what happens in Go does, in fact, I think, affect how the judge looks at Gomez. So it's kind of where we are. Jeff, I know we've got a bunch of K1s that are pending. We've got the Ramirez case in Manila, which we just effected service of summons on. I just saw yesterday or today. Yeah, that means, but we don't have government counsel enter an appearance in that, have we?
No. So the way that works is once you've perfected service, meaning that the court puts you on all the parties on notice that service has been proper. Then that's what starts that 60 days ticking for the government to respond. So they haven't entered their appearance. They may not enter their appearance till the last minute, but it allows us now to call the civil division and find out who the attorney is assigned to the case and start making phone calls to advocate for the plaintiff.
So that's Manila. And just as an aside, do you have an update in Milligan as it applies to any of these folks? I know you have regularly communicated with government counsel, who has been responsive, by the way. So where we are now with Milligan is, we're still doing the weekly status reports on Milligan, where we report particular consulates that are not moving. But we're really kind of at the point now where we're able to go to Joe with particular cases, where we're able to go to the U.S. attorney and say, this is a particular client that tried to get an interview and it's not working. So, so we're really kind of individually advocating now at this point on Milligan plaintiffs. And that has been effective for some folks, and others it is, I'm not going to speak for Joe Crilly, but I think it's been some frustration on his part as well.
Yeah, I mean, we always hear back, oh, have you heard back from the government? And the truth is we don't really hear back from the government. Joe doesn't report back to us what he finds out. He just makes a phone call. And the way that we know that those phone calls are working is because all of a sudden you get scheduled for an interview. If that doesn't happen, it means that, the consulate's ignoring Joe's phone calls. And that's when we have to take it to the judge and say, these particular cases are just not moving.
And what's interesting about that is one thing I think I've learned through this, and I learned something, I've been in this 32 years, I always learn something every day on immigration, is that it's quite clear that the consulates run the show. Visa issuance is clearly not directed out of Foggy Bottom in Washington, D.C. I mean, that these people at the consulate, they do apparently whatever they damn well please. I mean, that's just my take on it. It just seems like, yeah, we're not going to issue the visas. That's just kind of the way it is. And yet other consulates, we had a client, one of our plaintiffs in Ciudad Juarez, had a very interesting experience over last Friday when they went to the consulate with their fiance, and they're like, oh, you're not on the list. And he's like, what? And so he emails the consular official whom he'd been dealing with and copied us. And he said 5 consular officers came out to try to find them outside the consulate in Ciudad Juarez. That seems like and they literally had somebody with him the whole day for 4 hours while he went through that process. So, it just depends. I mean, Juarez has typically been a very good consulate. It's just they're overwhelmed with volume. Volume is a nightmare.
Yeah, and don't forget that on, Thursday of this week, the government's motion to dismiss is due in Milligan. So, we will have the first, some final dispositionary motion that we have to deal with this week. And so we're officially at this point where we're going before the judge and saying, Judge, these are the remaining plaintiffs, and this is the reason why these remaining plaintiffs have an unreasonable delay. So we will actually be litigating the unreasonable delay claims for the remaining plaintiffs.
Which now, 4 months later, for some of these folks, make a great deal of sense to the judge. He said, wait a second, I've had an order pending to issue these visas for 4 months, and you've done nothing?
Yeah, especially particular consulates, right? So if Manila is not moving at all, and the judge is able to say, but other consulates were able to move, why can't you move? Then that's good evidence for us that Manila is being arbitrary.
Yeah, and the Rio, interesting, is we have the Rio case pending as well. What's interesting about Rio is they have moved in Rio. It's just that their volume is so high, they have not done what is necessary to get covered. This goes back to something we said earlier, that they probably don't have enough consular staff. Whether they're operating or alternatives to operating.
Right. But one of the messages that we have to get to the judges is that that's fine as a very short-term excuse, but this is 15 months into COVID. What have you done to solve this problem? And they haven't done anything. If anything, they've ignored. They've just, it's worse than it was 15 months ago in terms of what they're doing. And that's the message that we have to get across. Is it's not excusable that there are a lot of people who have the same problem when the agency has taken no steps whatsoever to deal with this problem for everybody.
Greg, I was looking at our Milligan 3 list here about the updates, and there's a line at NBC or transferred or visa.
Right.
And so it looks like a lot of Milligan 3 folks have had interviews or are scheduled for interviews right now.
Oh yeah, no, I mean for sure. We're talking the obstinate consulates, Manila, Montreal. I mean, we know the ones on here. There have been a number of others that have really done a pretty good job, I would have to say, in terms of moving people along. They had stutters and started and stopped, but for the most part, we're getting a very steady, nice stream of people every day who are getting here on here. This case is working, but they have, we still have a few consulates that are not even scheduling appointments. I mean, some people were disappointed that their appointments got booked out further than they wanted, but for the most part, we're not seeing consulates that are just shutting down and saying we're not going to do anything, right, like some consulates have.
For example, I think Joburg has interviewed several of our clients at different Milligan stages, but there's a couple people that just not doing anything. It doesn't make any sense a lot of ways unless, see, the one thing we're not the individual lawyers. Maybe there's something in your case. Maybe there's an issue we're not aware of or that you're not aware of. So that's why it makes those individual cases so hard unless you see a pattern like you see in Manila. Now, Jeff, I do want to ask you about Moscow. I know we're preparing the Moscow process right now, but Moscow's got a bigger problem than just the lawsuit. And I think you're reaching out on that. Do you want to talk briefly about that?
Yeah, so Moscow has a problem with just their diplomacy in general. The consulate is basically being shut down, and diplomats are being moved forcefully out of Moscow altogether by the United States. So, not only do we have a problem with a huge backlog of visas and not processing, but we just have kind of shut down at the consulate. So I 10 minutes ago sent an email to Mr. Carilli and let him know that, we're concerned about this. We're going to have plaintiffs that are going to want transfers to other consulates. And does he have any ideas for how we can resolve the Moscow problems?
And this is true also for Go plaintiffs, for DV 2021 folks. And we actually have had at least 2 or 3 plaintiffs that have gotten their DV cases transferred to a different third country.
Yeah, if you have citizenship in any third country, or even your spouse has citizenship in a third country, you should use that to try and get the case transferred, because our experience is that the consulates will accept people who have a passport from that country.
Right. So I would definitely do that. Moscow is going to be, keep in mind, there's 5,000 winners from Russia. There is zero chance, really, at this point, that more than a handful are going to have interviews in Moscow at this point. Given everything that's concerned here. So you need to be finding a different way, a different place, if possible. And
that will be one of the issues we try and deal with in our cases. If they don't want to work on them there, then move them.
They got to figure out something. And what doesn't make sense is, well, why don't you let them, remote process, have the officer in Langley, Virginia, or whatever, do the interview and set it up in a remote location and get them done. So, again, offering solutions. Judges not going to want to get involved.
By the way, Chuck, because I've raised this here before, and sort of one of my pet solutions to all this is to have video interviewing. And that was actually, there was an NPR story yesterday about the India ban. And that was one of the subjects in the story about things that the State Department could be doing. And they specifically mentioned video interviewing, which would allow for, people in stateside to be conducting the interviews like what you're talking about. But, more importantly, it keeps people out of the buildings and should allow them to process, a huge chunk of people that they're not right now. That would get them really close to being able to continue getting back to some kind of normal processing.
Well, they could process so many people. Keep in mind, with this new prioritization, who's at the bottom of that pile? Are non-immigrant visa holders. So, you need an H-1B? Yeah, you have to wait behind the DV guys. Have a nice day. Yeah. And so it's really, really bad. So if you're in the U.S. and you need a new visa stamp, don't travel. Just don't travel. Yeah. You may not be coming back. So the Enunciado case, just as an update there, the government has filed their motion to dismiss. We have agreed to a 2-week delay in writing our response. So our response will be due on May 13th to that. Again, that's coming up to the point of remaining 23, I think, now, folks in the family employment case in the Enunciado. And we're working with the government to get people scheduled on that as well. On the EB-5 case, I talked to the government counsel. It's a Fong case. I talked to government counsel last week. He's getting back to me this week with a plan on interviews. So hopefully I'll be able to do an update on Wednesday around 2 when I'm back on my Facebook Live to make that happen. So that kind of gives you an EB-5 update about what's going on. We got some questions here. We're going to get to as many of these as we possibly can. Some of them we already answered, so we're not going to go into it. I will tell you up front, and I think I speak for Jeff and Greg when I say this, we don't monitor other lawyers' lawsuits. We just don't. We don't know what other people have filed. We don't know what their promises are. We don't have time. We're busy enough as it is. We don't need to be worrying about what other people are doing. But I will tell you, we feel very confident about all of our suits, including our DV 2021 case. We are tonight at midnight is the cutoff to be added as a plaintiff in the Go case. We had a waiting list, and we added people from the waiting list. We told people for weeks we were going to have a waiting list. We're adding those folks, and we're putting in an amended complaint with the names is all. It's very easy to do. I will also tell you, because I saw this question asked, everybody is a named plaintiff, all right? It's just that in the government database, I mean, how you, at the court, there's a limited number of names that you can put in. So as far as being a named plaintiff, everybody that's a plaintiff is a named plaintiff. It's just that you will not see your name on the PACER system because that's a limitation of the system. 1, 2, putting in a lot of names is a massive pain in the bum. So we're glad we don't have to do that. But you're all listed in the complaint. So you're going. All right. Let's see. This is actually interesting. In my country, which he doesn't identify, there are only 48 selectees. Only 4 are ready. Think about this. The whole country gets 48 visas. And my guess, even in a pretty small consulate, that could be no more than a couple of days' work for the IV section. I mean, really. I mean, one officer could probably blow through those in a couple of days. And 4. I mean, that speaks not to, in my opinion, working, but in deciding not to process DVs. That is evidence of intentionality. Also, I will note that, and I sent this around to you guys a little earlier, that they only processed like 234 DVs in March, and we're about to see how many did in April. I don't think it's many more than that. That's unconscionable. That is a selective choice. That's deciding we are not going to process these cases more than anything else, which is very, very frustrating. Let's see. If you're in the Kinsley lawsuit, are we supposed to contact the embassy or Guangzhou embassy with our case number with the known plaintiffs? Jeff, do you want to explain who you're supposed to contact if you want your case from the embassy to the consulate?
Yeah, so it's best. I mean, if you just email Guangzhou, then they're going to say, well, we're waiting for NVC to send us the file. And if you just email NVC, they're going to say that they're waiting for Guangzhou to request the file. So it's really important that you email both parties at the same time.
The only problem is that Guangzhou sort of makes it difficult to do that because
They do.
I think you have to have you have to email them over
They use the web app.
Yeah, but what you can do is you can let NVC in your email know that you've already contacted Guangzhou and that they've already told you that NVC has to send the file directly. So you can let them know the information you're getting back from the other party that's inconsistent.
The other thing you can also do, of course, is you can take those screenshots of the Guangzhou email and the KCC email and send them to your United States senator.
Mm-hmm.
And say, I need help here. What's going on? I mean, don't be afraid to use your U.S. senator here in the United States. This is a really good point on the Go plaintiffs, and this is true for Gomez. The KCC has a blame role here because they stopped processing people for DV 2021 in March. They just stopped processing them. They didn't take any more cases. And if you're not documentarily qualified of the KCC, you're not getting interviewed at an embassy. That's just really that simple. So you need to be on top of the KCC. And by the way, in the Go case, the KCC is named in the complaint. It's all part of the process. The judge will be made aware of what's going on. And we believe any order he issued will be directed at not only to consulates, but to the KCC as well. Amy, we only had 3 people sign up as far as
it's a little bit more. It's like 7.
7. We need 25 people on the new 01.
We can still file these cases, but we're not going to file them as a group case. We'll file
them
individually, and we'll have to talk to you guys about that.
Yeah. So the Tate case is done. All 38 plaintiffs have their O's, and they're in the United States or on their way. I do like this, Jeff. Can the Department of State stick to their prioritization plan and process as you see, regardless? So they're asking basically, can the Department of State ignore Judge Mehta?
Well, that's what they did in the first case. I mean, at the end of the day, that's why he finally decided to reserve the visas, is because, he was basically saying the government, the Department of State, can do their job. I'm going to give them time to do their job. And it wasn't until the last minute that the judge said, look, it's at this point, it's too late. You haven't done your job. And so the judge reserved the visas. So that's why we're already monitoring this case. We're moving quickly to summary judgment, as we want the government to know that we don't want to be having this battle in September 15th, about the remaining numbers. So we're trying to get this case resolved in July, so that if we win, it's done, and the Department of State is ordered to immediately authorize and issue those visas.
But I think the question is also, can a government agency ignore a judge? And the answer is no.
They're not supposed to.
Even the Trump administration, which, a few times during the Trump administration, I thought they were going to ignore the judges, and it was going to lead to some kind of constitutional crisis. But at the end,
DACA, they were forced to do DACA again.
Yeah, they're not.
So
they're not.
They
a
will.
judge's order,
if the judge says do something, they will do it.
Yeah, a judge's order is binding. I mean, that doesn't mean that they don't try to weasel out of it. I mean, we see what we see is they will take a very narrow interpretation of a judge's order to give the least amount of relief possible. We saw that in the Milligan case, where they're like, it only applies to named plaintiffs. When the proclamation was declared unlawful, but they said it's only unlawful as to named plaintiffs.
Jeff, just a quick update. This is the K1 Brazil. We kind of mentioned it earlier, but it's pending. Do we have a government counsel on that yet, or that's another one we don't have?
No, not government counsel yet. The summons have been confirmed and served. So this week we'll be making calls on all the individual mandamus cases against consulates for Brazil and Manila and Cairo.
All right, let's see here. A couple of things we haven't answered. Again, people, Judge Mena will have an early ruling. Keep in mind, on the Go case, just like the Gomez case, I know everybody wants their visas. I know you want to start your life. We get that, but speed is not necessarily the issue here. We need a good decision, and if it takes Judge Mehta 3 months to make the decision, that's okay with me, because Judge Mehta has reserved the visas in Gomez. Will be asking for the same thing for our plaintiffs in Go, so that you get the visas. And again, Department of State is rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, to use an American aphorism. They're just literally moving stuff around without increasing the ability to do it. So if judge comes out on July 15 and says, look, you've got 2.5 months to issue 55,000 visas. Come back to me on September 28th and tell me where you are. We all know that they're going to come back on September 28th and they're going to have 5,000 visas done. We know that's the case because of capability and their own prioritization. So that's kind of, don't so much focus on a date. Certainly in Gomez.
Hey, Chuck, can you pull up Axel's question from sort of toward the end?
Yeah, let me just fold that here. AXEL? Tell me to spell it.
AXEL. It's like fourth from the end.
Oh, there you go.
I think it's an interesting question.
Okay, so go right ahead.
So this is an issue I know a little bit about because I was involved with some drafting that was going on that made it into legislation last year in the HEROES Act, which had a provision that specifically said that the State Department could interview by video. And when the discussion was going on about that, it was always known that they could do this. They always had the authority to do this, but nobody was actually requiring them to do this. And the HEROES Act was specifically requiring them to do that. But I do recall specifically in the discussions there that this was something that the State Department could always do. And this was the HEROES Act language on that was specifically to order them to do what they already have the authority to do. There's nothing in the statute that bars video interviewing. It's just not in there. It's not spoken of at all on there. They don't get into that minutia anyway in the statutes. Now there may be provisions in in the Foreign Affairs Manual and other places about how they conduct interviews in person. But those are not congressional. Those aren't statutes passed by Congress. And if there's something in the Foreign Affairs Manual, they've already changed a number of things in response to COVID that are in there, as well as other regulations. They have the ability to make emergency changes, and I would say this is certainly that. But there's nothing in the law that prevents video interviewing.
So why don't they do it?
Honestly, I think that there's a resistance to do anything that's perceived as change, anything that makes things more difficult for them. And I think a lot of them just like the idea of having the person in front of them. There's always a belief that people are going to scam them somehow by doing it by video. I actually honestly think that they probably could do longer, more thorough interviews if they were doing them by video than the pressure they have at the consulate to, I don't know if people know this, but the typical interview at the consulate, especially on the non-immigrant side, I've been to some of these consulates, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and it's total judging books by their covers. These are not, there's no analysis that's going in. It's totally like basically looking at the mannerisms of the person and making a snap decision. I mean, it's total, in my opinion, it's totally wrong the way that happens where they make those decisions on there.
Basically, it's Donald Trump decision making 101. Basically.
Yeah, it's all, but and they've done studies over the years showing that people of certain races get denied more often, and people of certain backgrounds get denied more. And most of the time, it's because of the snap judgment biases of examiners who, they're fine people in general. I don't want to make it sound like they're a bunch of racists. They're not, but that's how human beings are. And we need to figure out more ways to, bring objectivity into the system. And I think video interviewing might help a little with that.
Maybe we could get AI to do interviews. That would be, maybe call Elon Musk. No, he hates AI. Something else. Somebody did ask, it's a good question because we've answered it before. And they asked, why don't we just have G28s on all the plaintiffs? And so we can contact the KCC. Because we are not your lawyers for the individual case. We are your lawyers to get to the place where your interview is legally allowed to be conducted. 1, 2, it is physically impossible for us to contact the KCC or the consulate for all of our plaintiffs. Now, if you want to hire one of our firms to help you, you're welcome to do that. But that's not what GO is about. GO is about getting those visas set aside so you can be interviewed, and one of those will get in your passport to come into the United States. I just thought it was important to answer that question. Okay. Can you ask the court to consent to live stream future hearings audio? No, the court is not going to YouTube live stream this. Yes, the court has physical limitations on how many people can call. And that's just because the court pays money for this, just like everybody else pays money. But the judge will not agree to YouTube live stream the hearing. Just zero chance that's going to happen. I'm not going to do that. Not going to do that. Let's see. By the way, if the DV winners in 2020, when they do get their visas, there is a blanket NIE in place. You don't need an NIE. It's already in place, right? I mean, that's how everybody came in the country. By the way, if you have your DV, I hope if you got your visa in September, you're already butts in the United States. And I don't want to call from somebody who said, I couldn't use my visa and get here by March 30th, 2021. I said, no sympathy whatsoever.
I know we can play numerous clips of us saying when these things have happened, get here. Don't wait it out. Don't assume it's around forever.
Do whatever you do. The only other amendment I can imagine to Kinsley is to amend the India case into it. But we'll see what state does tomorrow. We'll see. Hopefully they aren't dumb enough really to deny visas. I just hope they're not that dumb. All right.
They are that dumb. And
they are.
I'm pretty sure they're not backing down from this policy.
By the way, as far as I know, there are no other cases eligible to be included in the GO case. And so as far as I know, there's nothing that is going to be amended into GO from anywhere else. Okay. Let's see what else is there.
Well, we are adding plaintiffs.
Oh, plaintiffs. That's an amendment to our own case.
Yeah.
Right. That's not going to slow anything down.
And the judge may even ask, what else is out there? And we'll say, Judge, I'm sure there's lots of cases out there, but
one thing is, I saw another comment later to fight, people being added to our case. We really don't have a lot of control over that. When you file a motion, when you file a complaint in court, you're required to disclose any related cases if there are, cases out there that have related legal claims. So if other attorneys, and I anticipate they will, file other DV 2021 cases, they will be noticing the court that go as a related case. And the result could be that those cases are consolidated with go. And we don't really have any control over that. That's up to the judge. Right. If that happens, some of those attorneys may move for class action. And we don't really have any control over that either. Normally if those cases are consolidated, they want the attorneys to work together. So we will try our best to work with other plaintiffs, but a lot of this we don't have a lot of control over.
I think it worked pretty well in Gomez.
It did.
Generally speaking, our case was consolidated in. There were five or more. I don't remember.
I think there's 5 separate cases total.
Yeah. So it's not a disaster if that happens. But
would you say that that's likely in this case? I think it's probably likely in DV 2021 that there will be other cases consolidated.
As far as I know, there's nothing else pending in DC that I'm aware of. It doesn't mean something will be filed in DC. But the good news, it's always going to be the go case. So we're lead counsel, and we've got a plan in place as far as timing is concerned for resolve this case. And one thing we will fight for is to maintain that timing.
Yep.
Because instead of doing what was done last year with Gomez and seeking a preliminary injunction and a temporary restraining order, we're going right for the jugular, right for the final decision, because this case merits it. We don't want to be fighting in March 2022 over this case. We want a decision from the judge that then will be implemented by the Department of State, who will likely appeal again against the people's interest. You would think they would again take the message, stop appealing these cases and just take the loss and get on with it. But that might not be the case. Okay. Oh, okay. Jonathan says Rio is an issue interview dates, but not some of the oldest cases to suspect our complaint. I know that there's these Facebook groups, Jeff, that people talk on there.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know they're not the oldest case? And why wouldn't they be the oldest cases? That to me doesn't make sense that a consulate wouldn't take the oldest interview-ready cases.
Yeah. The problem is I think everybody's doing this based on the notice of action date. And when you do it based on the notice of action date, it's the wrong way to do it because that's a completely different agency, right? So the fact that USCIS completed their work by a particular date does not then mean that the Department of State has to process it in that order, because a lot of that is dependent on you. For example, how quickly did you get your case and your documents to the NVC? How quickly was your case declared documentarily ready? How quick, are there issues in your case that are requiring on-the-ground investigations, like a prior marriage or some sort of suspected fraud? So you really can't say that your case is in any particular line based on a notice of acceptance.
Would you say that the date that the case was transferred from NVC to the consulate is the best indicator of what the order ought to be?
Should be.
It should be, but again, even then, if you ask plaintiffs like, oh, but this person has been scheduled, I haven't, and you start to ask them questions about that, you realize things like, oh, well, they petitioned for somebody in the past, or or there's a marriage certificate that they didn't provide. So in consults that I've had, there often seems to be some underlying reason why the case could be.
Remember, when it gets to the consulate, the officer is going to physically look at somebody at the consulate going to physically look at the file.
Right.
Even though NVC says, they're interview ready, they might go, I don't understand this tax return. Mm-hmm. Or I don't understand how this income meets the requirements that they said they did. So there's all those things that go into it. Here's a really good question. I love this. Dimitri, I want to point out the flaw in your logic that the U.S. consulate in the U.S., the Russian consulate in the U.S. has the same number of visa officers as the U.S. consulate in Moscow. Nobody wants to go to Russia. There's not a big long line for visas. It's just the demand is so. Now I know they're still not issuing visas. I get that, but the demand is so much higher in Moscow to the U.S. than in the U.S. to Moscow. And I'm still waiting for my invite from Putin. He hasn't invited me over for dinner or anything yet, so we got that going. But I thought it was a really great question because it doesn't necessarily add up. Looks like KCC is stopped processing after 12,000. You know, Greg, I'm not a numbers guy. I mean, I don't follow the per country numbers. I don't know who's got what numbers. But if they think, and I know I saw this, they think they may only issue 12,000 cases out of, for this. Now, that wouldn't make sense if because they're going to need at least double the number to issue the visas.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know where this is coming from. I'm not saying that that Ingo is not telling us something that's factual. I just don't have that information, so it's hard to comment on it. One other thing I'll say, Chuck, about the Russia thing that Dimitri had said, I don't believe we actually, for like tourists and things, do we even need visas as Americans to go?
I think we do.
We do? Okay.
I think these days, I think we have to have one. I mean,
even stopping on a cruise ship, because there's a lot of cruise ships that stop in that do that St. Petersburg stop.
Well, maybe I'm thinking about it. I looked at one of those cruises last year. I think you do have to get a visa.
Interesting. Okay. I
think to step off the boat in St. Petersburg or someplace. Here's a great example. Ghana, which had a COVID problem, but nothing. It was pretty mild. They did a really good job of quarantining. COVID's not killing 1 million people in Ghana, and they literally have not interviewed a single DV case.
They've also been one of our problem consulates. We haven't talked that much about because but in the Milligan case, that Ghana has been a problem consulate, and we still have round 2 people, I think, from Ghana. Yeah,
it makes no sense whatsoever. Okay. Yeah. Let's see here. How long are the K1 backlogs at embassies? I don't know how many. Since the problem is you have K1s at USCIS that are filed. Let's call that number X. X minus a certain percent are approved. X minus another certain percent get to the NBC. X minus another percent get approved for interview ready. And then X final is what you get at the embassy. I don't know. I mean, I don't think the sheer number of receipts by USCIS of K1s has dropped during COVID, but I would think it may have gone up. Meeting online, all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Thank you, Dimitri. I was just teasing you. I hope you don't mind. Hey, look who showed up, Lily. Yeah,
hey, Lily.
Yeah, there you go. See, Lily answered the question for us. She couldn't join us tonight. And of course, we're missing Aaron. I forgot to excuse Aaron. He is slammed. Could not be joining up. Now, MA says a lot of EV interviews in April, but not many scheduled for May. Well, that's easy. Why? Because they just deprioritize them. They just put them at the bottom of the list.
There won't be any in May.
There won't be
any DV cases scheduled in May.
Yeah. So it is going to be something to see really what happens. This, again, we're going to, we can mention all this stuff to the judge. Say, judge, just FYI. There's nobody being interviewed in May because of this notice they sent out last week. We just thought you might want to know that now. So we'll go. Now, I will tell you, as one final thing, Gomez will not come up in the Go meeting with Judge Mehta. Okay, it's a separate case. Those lawyers other than us, are not in the meeting, so we cannot discuss Gomez with Judge Mehta. That would be an ex parte communication, so that will not come up. He asks a question about it, we'll answer, but we will not be bringing up Gomez. Okay, we will just not be doing that. All right, there's Switzerland has 48 selectees. That's weird because Switzerland's been pretty good on visas, right? I mean, they issued K1s for us. I've had E's down there, so we'll go from there. All right, guys, a great night on Impact Litigation. Tomorrow at Greg, 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
7 o'clock Central Time.
Yeah.
Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Jeff, noon Mountain Time.
Let me just say, tomorrow
Thursday.
night on ours, the focus is largely going to be on the India ban.
Great. That should be
So
really good.
if you're expecting to talk about all the other stuff, it's probably not going to happen tomorrow night.
My Wednesday will likely be mostly in Spanish because it's Spanish week here at Cook Baxter Immigration, but I'll answer questions in English as well. And then, Jeff, you got Thursday at noon.
Yep.
And I know, by the way, I do have tomorrow in Mandarin. Tomorrow in Mandarin at 2 o'clock, not featuring me. Sheshe, I got nothing. All right, I got nothing. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Jeff, don't hang up yet. All right.
Okay, I won't.
We're going to sign off and see you guys in a bit.